Okay, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about Ahinoam. So the title of our study today, Ahinoam, the wife of Saul, and Ahinoam, the wife of David. Is this the same woman or not? And just give a little background here. I've been reading the Bible for over a decade, and this just hit me last 3 or 4 days, and something that's been wrestling in my mind, and it's been a good wrestling. So I want you to share that burden if you want. So 1 Samuel 14:50. Here's the passage we're going to look at. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz, and this is King Saul we're talking about. And then later in the same book, we have his rival David, 1 Samuel chapter 25. It said David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel. And so both of them, and that's speaking of Abigail and Ahinoam, were his wives. For me, this was easy to miss. Like I said, I missed it for over a decade. But the obvious question comes up here is this Ahinoam the same woman? This is the only time the name comes up in the Bible. It's either talking about Ahinoam, Saul's wife, or Ahinoam, David's wife. Otherwise, the name never comes up. So is it the same woman, or is the Bible speaking of two different women? I'm going to give you the conclusion here right now. I'm pretty sure the Bible provides absolutely no way of saying with 100% certainty whether or not it is, but that's just the beauty of the Bible. So does this mean that we should abandon the discussion? And I think the answer to that is absolutely not. So why should we continue looking at this? I think the Bible, it's messing with us. And I mean that in a good way. The Bible is encouraging us to just ponder these things. The word is encouraging us to examine the motives of these men, Saul and David, and even Ahinoam. And ultimately, we should be examining ourselves after we're done examining them. So some immediately thoughts here are, would David really have taken Saul's wife? I mean, so don't be so sure of your yes or your no answer. And you might take the no position based on David's words. David said this 4 times in our 1st and 2nd Samuel, said, "The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed." So David's heart was never to do anything evil against Saul. So you might take that position and say, no, David would never do that. Someone who takes a yes position might say, well, David committed plenty of other sins, adultery, murder. So it wasn't outside of his range. So, just giving this some thought the last few days, again, knowing that there's no answer, you still just want to ponder these things. This could have been a much more complicated situation. Consider this. Perhaps Ahinoam defected to David from King Saul. And this could have been for any number of reasons. We know Saul was just out of his mind. Saul obviously wanted to kill David. He was even willing to kill his own son, Jonathan. And I'm sure you've read that before too, but all the things that were going on with Saul's mind, it would be completely reasonable for Ahinoam to want to leave, and she could have defected to David. Certainly she and David knew each other. David had spent much time with Jonathan and with Saul in those years prior to this. So think about this. If she had gone and defected to David, if David refused to keep her under his protection, he would likely be putting her in great danger. Saul might have wanted to kill her, or he was just leaving a woman out on the streets, basically. So David is almost obligated at this point to keep her. But you can't just look at that from the good point of view, oh, he can be a nice guy and take her, because he's a sinful man too. So he's probably got all kinds of other stuff going through his mind. Just think about all the drama. I mean, here's a guy who's trying to kill me and his wife is coming to me for protection. Again, so many possibilities out there. So this scenario, if it's true, is an extremely complex situation. And here's some other passages to consider that add a little more intrigue to it. 1 Samuel chapter 20, it said, "Then Saul's anger was aroused against Jonathan, and he said to him, 'You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness?'" So clearly the perverse, rebellious woman that Saul is talking about is Ahinoam here. So why might he be saying this? Again, could be a number of reasons. Maybe she had already left him at this point. Who knows? Next passage we're going to look at. And when David had gone into Bathsheba, Nathan the prophet spoke the word of the Lord to David. And here's what he said. This is the word of the Lord to David through Nathan. "I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your keeping, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been too little, I also would have given you much more." So what is Nathan saying here? Oh, and if we are to take this literally, again, we've got some problems here, because it said, "I gave you your master's wives," plural, and the Bible only tells us that Saul had one wife. I mean, again, maybe he had others. Maybe Ahinoam was only the mother of Jonathan. Again, other possibilities. But as stated earlier, the answer to the Ahinoam question cannot be answered from the text. I don't see any way in the answer to the Bible. to have 100% certainty either way. So where does this leave us? So consider, the Bible has intentionally left us this question, and it's an unanswerable question. But again, the Bible is messing us in a good way. I think we should look at this. It causes us to just examine David, to examine Saul, to examine Ahinoam. What would they do, or what did they do in this situation, if it's possible that this was the scenario that played out. But more importantly, when we're done examining them, we need to examine ourselves. What would you do, or what would I do if we were David, if we were Saul, or even if you were Ahinoam? We need to just let the word of God do its work in us. And I think it's awesome that there's no way to answer this question, but just something to just, again, let the word of God do its work in us. And as David said in Psalm 139, it said, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." So I hope they enjoyed that. Maybe that'll be a springboard to you to do a study on that as well. But let me know if you have any questions, or if you want to add any comments to the video, please do that. And until next time, as always, contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints, and God bless.